Hi, my name is Jennifer McClure, and this is a short video lecture on counterintelligence programs. This lecture was prepared for History 6320, Vietnam Wars and Public Policy at Bowling Green State University. COINTELPRO refers to the FBI's counterintelligence programs. These programs began approximately in 1956 and ended in approximately 1971. The FBI's justification for the program was that the United States had to find a way to minimize risks to its security while at the same time upholding the rights guaranteed to the people by the Constitution. Initial efforts at counterintelligence on the part of the FBI began in the 1920s with the investigation of the activities of the Ku Klux Klan. It's not until 1939 that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave the FBI more formal powers for intelligence gathering of groups that were considered to be, quote, detrimental to the internal security of the United States. There were literally thousands of counterintelligence programs begun by the FBI during this time period, so the list provided here is far from comprehensive. But some of the targets of these programs were the Communist Party in the United States, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Ku Klux Klan, as previously mentioned, the Puerto Rican Independence Movement, the Civil Rights Movement, the New Left, which is the primary topic of this presentation, the American Indian Movement, and also teachers with activist leanings. All FBI offices, including the Washington, D.C. headquarters, were involved in creating and running these counterintelligence programs during this period. Each counterintelligence program was assigned to an agent at each individual field office. That agent was responsible for reporting their findings to the special agent in charge of the field office. That special agent in charge would then report those findings to the FBI director. For the entirety of this program, the FBI director was J. Edgar Hoover. Initially, the special agents in charge were tasked with putting together a comprehensive list of organizers and organizations involved in the New Left anti-war movement. Once that list was complete, the special agent in charge was supposed to provide quarterly updates to the director. It does seem as though the local offices did have a lot of autonomy in deciding which organizations to target, which activities to target, and also how they would go about targeting those organizations and activities. As this video lecture was prepared for a course in Vietnam Wars and Public Policy, the counterintelligence program targeting the New Left anti-war movement is the focus of this video lecture. The FBI's attention was drawn to the New Left anti-war movement in the mid-1960s, following some early gatherings and protests. Most notably, according to the sources that were referenced for this video lecture, were the teach-ins beginning at the University of Michigan in March of 1965. These teach-ins spread rapidly across the country to many different college campuses. Also, the March on Washington, which was organized by Students for a Democratic Society in April of 1965, was troublesome to the FBI. A little later on, protests at the University of Wisconsin and Columbia University, both of which were broken up using local law enforcement and ended violently. Following the events at Columbia University on May 9, 1968, a memo was written and issued by C.D. Brennan of the FBI in which he calls for the creation of a formal counterintelligence program. Brennan states that this counterintelligence program should work to stop the groups from working together successfully and also hinder recruitment of new members to all of the various anti-war groups that were forming at the time. The reason given, according to these memos, is that some students were calling for revolution in the United States. Some students were calling for the defeat of the United States in Vietnam, And perhaps most notably, some students had criticized the FBI and specifically Director Hoover. About 2 months later, on July 5th, 1968, Director J. Edgar Hoover wrote and issued a memo outlining the ways in which the special agents in charge should be working against the New Left. Among other things, Hoover tells these special agents in charge that they should begin preparing mailings and leaflets to be sent to students who had not yet joined the anti-war movement in an effort to deter them from joining in the future. He also suggests that the special agents in charge attempt to instigate conflict between the groups by pointing out the differences in methods and by exploiting personality conflicts within the leadership. He suggests that information on the activities of students be sent to the parents of those students. He also mentions that that same information could be sent to professors, university leaders, religious leaders, and the parents' employers, all in an effort to get those parents to act to stop their students from participating in the movement. Hoover also suggests using local law enforcement to arrest any members of the movement who were involved in drug use. He points out that the media could be utilized and specifically wants special agents in charge to have the media focus on the fact that the students involved in the anti-war movement were a part of the minority on their college campuses and not the majority of college students. He also suggests that special agents in charge direct their agents to use ridicule and misinformation to try to bring down the number of students involved in the movement. These are a couple of documents that the FBI created to be distributed to members of the anti-war movement as well as potential members of the anti-war movement. The one on the left is designed to create a little dissension in the ranks and to point out the differences in opinion between the differing groups that were participating in the anti-war movement at the time. Specifically, it calls out members of the Socialist Workers' Party and the Young Socialist Alliance and suggests that they should be excluded from the anti-war movement. The one on the right has an intended audience of potential people who were interested in becoming involved in the movement and seems to be sort of a scare tactic. It reads, "I have in my hand a list of 200 names of people who don't advocate the violent overthrow of our government." The idea here being that the anti-war movement was something to be afraid of, much like McCarthyism or the Red Scare was something to be afraid of. In a short video lecture, it's nearly impossible to give a comprehensive list of all of the ways that nearly 500 FBI field offices attempted to derail the anti-war movement. The list below is really only a tiny snapshot of the methods of action that were used. The FBI worked in concert with the Justice Department to have key members of the anti-war movement arrested for conspiracy and then prosecuted on those charges. Local law enforcement was used to arrest students on possession of drug charges, and then the FBI placed pressure on those students to become informants under threat of being prosecuted on their drug charges. Local law enforcement, again, was used to arrest people for improper display of the American flag or desecration of the flag. The local law enforcement, again, was used in raiding offices of underground newspapers that were working with the anti-war movement. This was typically done under the guise of searching for pornography or obscenity, but in reality was just done to stop the distribution of those materials. Universities were pressured to fire faculty members who either were sympathetic to the anti-war movement or who were actively working for the anti-war movement. The FBI also used what were referred to as agent provocateurs to gather information and set up members of the various anti-war organizations. Really, this amounted to entrapment. The FBI's counterintelligence programs began to come to an end in March of 1971 when members of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI broke into FBI offices in Media, Pennsylvania, stole some documents relating to counterintelligence programs, and released them to the press. The following month, J. Edgar Hoover officially ordered the program to be closed, and in doing so closed several FBI field offices. But it wasn't until November of 1974 that the FBI officially admitted to its involvement in counterintelligence programs, and the Attorney General began an investigation of the FBI activity. In terms of the legality of the counterintelligence program, the investigations that were undertaken following the end of the program showed that some FBI informants and agents did break various laws while undercover, and whether or not they were prosecuted for those crimes seems to have been dependent upon the situation. The larger issue, though, are the thousands of illegal warrantless wiretaps and bugs that were placed during this time period as part of the program, as well as the tens of thousands of pieces of mail that were intercepted and opened without warrants by FBI agents during this time. When this policy came to light, the effect on the way the public viewed the FBI was significant. As you can see, in 1975, the favorable rating given to the FBI was 70 points lower than 10 years prior. While the public's opinion did rebound, as shown here, this mistrust could be the reason that authors on the subject in the 80s and 90s didn't believe that the agency had really released all the pertinent documents that they had been ordered to hand over. Later authors reviewed for this presentation don't have the same mistrust. However, as this program failed to stop the anti-war movement and it ended in disgrace, it certainly cannot be characterized as a successful policy for the FBI.